The Dragon Emperor came home 3 days early.
Come on, you can do
Nobody
it.
knew he was coming.
There you go.
Not the
What
guards,
a brave little dragon.
not the servants, and not the human maid who was about to change his life forever. For 3 long years, Emperor Cale Drakemore had fought in the Northern War. He was the most feared dragon shifter in the Empire. His enemies called him the Cold Flame. They said he had no heart. They said nothing could surprise him. They were wrong, because on this quiet night, inside his own palace, he was about to see something that would shake him more than any battle ever did. The war had ended faster than anyone expected. Cale did not send word ahead. He wanted to arrive in silence. A part of him, part he never admitted out loud, wanted to see what his palace looked like when no one was performing for him. So he flew through the night sky alone, his great black wings cutting through the clouds, and landed in the shadows of the East Garden just after midnight. The palace was dark. Most of the staff was asleep. Cale shifted into his human form and walked the halls he had not seen in 3 years. Everything looked the same. The marble floors, the tall golden doors, the portraits of his ancestors staring down at him with cold dragon eyes. But then he noticed something strange. A soft light was glowing from under the door of the West Wing. That wing had been locked before he left. No one was allowed inside. No one had a key except him. Cale stopped walking. His heartbeat slowed the way it always did before a fight. Someone was in there. Someone had broken into the most private part of his palace. He moved without a sound, the way only a dragon can. He pressed his hand against the door and found it unlocked. Slowly, carefully, he pushed it open just enough to see inside. And there she was. Myra, the human maid. The quiet girl who had served his palace for 5 years. The one who never spoke unless spoken to. The one everyone forgot was even in the room. She was kneeling on the floor in the middle of the forbidden chamber, surrounded by old books and burning candles. Her sleeves were rolled up, and on her bare arms, glowing soft and gold in the candlelight, were markings that no human should ever have. Dragon markings. Cale's breath caught in his chest. He knew those markings. He had seen them only once before, in a painting that was 1,000 years old. They belonged to the royal bloodline of the Sky Dragons. A bloodline that was supposed to be gone. Destroyed. Erased from history by his own grandfather in a war that no one in the palace was allowed to talk about. But that was not the most shocking part. The most shocking part was what Myra was doing. She was holding the Emperor's seal, the ancient stone that controlled the protective wall around the entire empire. The stone that only responded to royal dragon blood. And it was glowing in her hands, responding to her, accepting her. For 3 years, Cale had fought enemies who tried to break that wall from the outside. And now, a human maid was holding the heart of his empire in her small hands, inside his own home. He should have been angry. He should have burst through the door and demanded answers. But Cale did not move. Because then Myra began to whisper. Her voice was soft and shaking, and the words she spoke froze him in place. "I'm sorry, Emperor," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm doing this to save your life, save his life." From what? From who? Cale stood in the shadows, the most powerful dragon in the world, and felt something he had not felt since he was a child. Fear, not of Myra, but of what she might know. Something was coming for him. Something so dangerous that a hidden sky dragon had spent 5 years pretending to be a maid just to stay close to him. And she had no idea he was standing right behind her. Cale stepped back from the door without making a sound. His mind was racing. Every instinct in his body told him to confront her right now. But a deeper instinct, the one that had kept him alive through 3 wars, told him to wait. To watch, to learn what game was being played inside his own palace. So he did something no one would ever expect from the Cold Flame. He walked away. The next morning, the palace exploded with news. The Emperor had returned. Servants ran through the halls. Cooks rushed to prepare a feast. Guards stood taller than they had in years. Kale walked through it all with his usual cold face, nodding at no one, smiling at nothing. But his golden eyes were searching for one person. He found her in the main hall, lined up with the other servants to greet him. Myra stood at the very end of the row, her head bowed low, her hands folded in front of her plain gray dress. She looked small, quiet, harmless, exactly like a person who wanted to be invisible. Kale walked down the line slowly. He thanked the head cook. He nodded at the old gardener. And then he stopped in front of Myra. The room went silent. The emperor never stopped for low-ranking servants. Never. Your name, he said. Myra's shoulders tightened for just 1 second. Most people would have missed it. Kale did not. Myra, Your Majesty, she said softly. Look at me, she lifted her face. Her eyes were brown. Plain, simple brown. But Kale had seen those arms glowing gold just hours ago. He knew what was hiding under that plain face. Sky dragons were masters of hiding their true forms. It was the reason his grandfather's war against them had taken so long. They could look human for years. They could fool anyone. But Myra's eyes did something strange. They did not look afraid. For one tiny moment, they looked sad, almost sorry. Then she dropped her gaze back to the floor, and the moment was gone. Bring my tea to the war room tonight, Kale said. You. No one else. A whisper ran through the servant line. The war room was where the emperor kept his battle maps and his secrets. Servants were never allowed inside. The head maid opened her mouth to object, then closed it. Nobody questioned the emperor. Yes, Your Majesty, Myra said quietly. That night, Kale sat alone in the war room, watching the door. He had planned this carefully. The war room had no windows. One door. And hidden in the walls, carved by his ancestors, were ancient stones that could sense dragon magic. If Myra used any power, any trick, any spell, he would know instantly. She knocked at exactly 9. She entered with the tea tray, set it down gently, and bowed. Every move was perfect. Every move was the move of a servant who had practiced being invisible for years. Pour it, Kale said. She poured the tea. Her hands did not shake. Tell me, Myra, he said, leaning back in his chair. What do you know about the West Wing? The teapot froze in the air for half a second. Then she set it down. Nothing, Your Majesty. The West Wing is forbidden. Yes, Kale said slowly. It is. He stood up and walked around the table, circling her like a hunter. And yet last night, someone was inside it. Someone lit candles. Someone touched things that belonged to my bloodline. Things that would kill an ordinary human the moment their skin touched them. He stopped right behind her. He could hear her breathing now, fast and shallow. So either a ghost has moved into my palace, he said quietly, or someone here is not what they pretend to be. Silence. Myra stared straight ahead at the wall. And then she said something that turned Kale's blood to ice. If you found the intruder, Your Majesty, you should let them finish what they started. Or in 30 days, everyone in this palace will be dead. Including you. Kale grabbed her arm and spun her around. And this time, her eyes were not brown. They were gold. Gold. Bright, burning gold, like the sun trapped inside a storm. The eyes of a royal sky dragon. Eyes that should not exist anymore. Kale did not let go of her arm. 30 days, he said. Explain. Now Myra did not fight him. She did not run. Instead, she did something stranger. She reached into her dress pocket with her free hand and pulled out a small piece of black stone. She placed it on the table. The moment it touched the wood, the stone began to smoke. Do you know what this is? She asked. Her voice was different now. Still soft, but no longer the voice of a servant. It was steady, royal, Kale stared at the stone. He did know. He had seen pieces like it on the battlefield in the north, buried in the bodies of his fallen soldiers. His generals had called them cursed rocks. No one could explain them. It's called void stone, Myra said. And it's poison to dragons. Not the kind that kills fast. The kind that kills slow. It spreads through the ground like roots. It poisons the magic in the land. And for the last 3 years, while you were away fighting, someone has been burying it all around this palace. Kale released her arm. Impossible. The protective wall blocks all dark magic. The wall blocks attacks from outside, Myra said. These stones were planted from the inside. By someone who lives here. Someone who walks these halls every day. She looked him straight in the eyes. Your war in the north was never the real war. Emperor. It was a distraction. Someone wanted you far away while they turned your own home into trap. In 30 days, when the moon goes dark, every void stone will activate at once. The wall will fall, and every dragon inside these walls will lose their power in a single night. Kale's mind flashed back to the war. 3 years of strange battles. Enemies who attacked but never tried to winches. Fights that seemed designed to keep him busy, to keep him away. He had felt it back then, deep in his bones, that something was wrong. Now it all made sense. Why should I believe a sky dragon, he said. Your people are my family's oldest enemy. My grandfather destroyed your bloodline. Something flickered across Myra's face. Painches. Old, deep painches. No, Emperor. Your grandfather didn't destroy us. He was tricked into it. The same enemy that is hunting you now used him like a tool. They whispered lies into his ears. They showed him fake proof that sky dragons were planning to take his throne. So he burned our cities. He hunted my family across the world. And the real enemy watched and laughed, because with the sky dragons gone, no one was left who knew how to fight them. She stepped closer to him. My grandmother escaped the fire with one job. Protect the royal bloodline of the Drakemores. Not because she loved your family, but because she knew the truth. The sky dragons and the fire dragons were never meant to be enemies. We were meant to be shields for each other. 2 halves of one wall. That's why your emperor's seal glows in my hands. It remembers what your people forgot. Kale walked to the window and stared out at the dark garden. Everything he had been taught, everything his father and grandfather had told him about history, was cracking apart in his head. The night I returned, he said slowly, you were in the West Wing. You said you were trying to save my life. What were you doing? Renewing the wall, Myra said. Your seal is dying. Emperor. The void stones have been draining it for 3 years. I've been sneaking into the West Wing every month to feed it my own magic. It's the only thing keeping it alive, she paused. But I'm running out of strength. The seal needs more than I can give. It needs both bloodlines. Fire and sky. Together, and if I refuse, Myra picked up the smoking black stone and held it out to him. Then in 30 days, you'll find out who your real enemy is. But you'll find out as a man with no fire, no wings, and no empire. Kale looked at the stone. Then at her. Then we have 30 days, he said, to find the traitor living in my palace. The hunt began the next morning, but it had to be a silent hunt. If the traitor learned that Kale knew about the void stones, they could activate them early. So the emperor and the maid made a plan. In front of the palace, nothing would change. Myra would stay a servant. Kale would stay cold and distant. But every night, in the war room, they would work together to find the enemy hiding in plain sight. Kale started with a list. Only 12 people had stayed in the palace all 3 years of the war. Only 12 people could have planted the stones. His own uncle, Lord Varon, who ruled the palace while Kale was away. The head of the guards, the royal doctor, the treasury keeper, and 8 senior servants. Night after night, Kale and Myra studied them. Myra knew things no one expected a maid to know. She had spent 5 years watching everyone, listening through walls, reading faces. She knew the doctor lied about where he went on full moons. She knew the treasury keeper had debts. She knew which guards could be bought. And night after night, something else was happening. Something neither of them planned. Cale found himself watching the way Mira's eyes lit up when she solved a puzzle. He noticed that she always saved a piece of bread from dinner for the old blind dog by the kitchen. For a man who trusted no one, he was starting to trust her. Worse, he was starting to look forward to 9 o'clock more than anything else in his day. One night, Myra fell asleep at the war room table, her head resting on a map. Cale sat across from her for a long time. The cold flame, the most feared dragon alive, quietly took off his coat and laid it over her shoulders. He told himself it meant nothing. He knew he was lying. On the 19th day, they found their first real clue. Myra dug up one of the void stones from the garden and studied the markings carved into it. The carving style was unique. Only one school in the world taught it. A school in the far eastern Isles. Cale checked the palace records, and his blood ran cold. Only one person in the palace had ever studied in the Eastern Isles. His uncle, Lord Varon, the man who raised Cale after his father died. The man who taught him to fly. The man who had hugged him at the palace gates just weeks ago, with tears in his eyes, saying, "Welcome home. My boy." Cale wanted to be wrong. So on the 23rd day, he set a trap. At dinner, he announced a lie to all 12 suspects. He said he would be leaving in 2 days to visit the northern graves, to honor his fallen soldiers, and he would be gone for a week. If the traitor believed the emperor would be missing during the dark moon, they would relax. They would make a move. And Cale would be watching. That night, Myra waited in the shadows of the East Hall, and Cale watched the west. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just past 2 in the morning, a hooded figure slipped out of the sleeping quarters and moved toward the old chapel. Cale followed, silent as smoke. The figure entered the chapel, knelt by the ancient altar, and pulled it aside, revealing stairs going down into the dark. A hidden room. Under the chapel. In a palace Cale thought he knew completely. The figure lit a candle below, and Cale finally saw the face. It was not his uncle. It was Myra. She was kneeling in front of a strange black mirror, and the mirror was glowing. A deep voice came from inside it, a voice like ice cracking. "Report," it said. And Cale heard Myra answer. "He trusts me now. The Emperor suspects his uncle. Everything is going exactly as planned." Cale's heart turned to stone in his chest. He stepped back into the darkness, and for the second time in his life, the cold flame felt fear. But this time, it came with a pain he had never felt before. The pain of a heart that had finally opened, breaking. He had caught his maid once before. Now he had caught her again. And this time, it looked like the unthinkable was true. Cale did not sleep that night. By morning, he had made his choice. He would not arrest Myra. Not yet. A king who moves too fast loses the game. If Myra was working for the enemy, then the enemy thought they were winning. And an enemy who thinks they are winning gets careless. So that night, when Myra came to the war room with the tea, Cale smiled and played his part. But this time, he told her a new lie. He told her the real Emperor's seal was not in the West Wing at all. He said the one she had been feeding her magic to was a decoy, and the true seal was hidden under his throne. He watched her eyes carefully as he said it. She only nodded. 2 nights later, on the dark moon, the trap closed. A hooded figure crept into the throne room at midnight and began pulling at the stones beneath the throne. Cale stepped out of the shadows, flames curling around his fists. Looking for something, Uncle, the figure froze. Then Lord Varon lowered his hood and laughed. "Clever boy. But you're too late." He raised his hand, and the void stones buried around the palace began to scream. The protective wall shimmered and cracked. Cale felt his fire flicker inside his chest. growing weak. Varen's eyes had turned black, completely black, and the voice that came out of him was the ice-crack voice from the mirror. "Your uncle invited me in years ago," the voice said. "He traded his soul for a promise of your throne. The same trade your grandfather refused. That's why I had to destroy the sky dragons first. They could see me. They could always see me." Kale fell to one knee as his power drained. The thing inside Varen walked toward him slowly. "No fire. No wings. No empire," it said. "Just like the maid promised you?" "Yes," said a voice from the doorway. "Exactly like I promised him." Myra walked into the throne room, calm as morning. The creature smiled at her. "Good. You kept him blind. Now finish your task." "My task," Myra said softly, "was given to me by my grandmother. Protect the Drakemore bloodline. Find the shadow that destroyed our people." And when it finally shows its true face, her plain brown eyes burned into gold, and the markings on her arms blazed like sunrise. "Burn it," the creature's smile died. It understood too late. Myra had known about the mirror for months. Every report she gave it was a lie built to make it feel safe, to pull it out of hiding, to make it show itself on this exact night. Even the scene in the chapel had been a performance. She had heard Kale following her. She had let him see it, because she needed the creature to believe its plan was perfect, and that meant everyone had to believe it. Even the Emperor. Mira threw the true Emperor's seal to Kale. It had been in her pocket all along. "Both bloodlines," she shouted. Now Kale caught the seal, and Myra gripped his hand over it. Fire and sky, together, just as the ancient dragons intended. Light exploded through the throne room. The void stones shattered one by one across the palace grounds. The shadow ripped out of Varen's body, screaming, and burned away into nothing. The protective wall rose again, stronger than it had been in 1,000 years. In the silence after, Varen lay breathing but empty, free of the thing that had used him. And Kale stood holding the hand of a maid who was never a maid, looking at the last royal sky dragon. "You let me think you betrayed me," he said. "It broke me, I know," Myra whispered. "A heart has to break before it can open all the way. Yours just did, 1 year later." The Empire watched the cold flame do the unthinkable. He knelt before a servant girl, in front of the whole world. The Dragon Emperor offered his crown, his fire, and his heart, and the maid who once stood invisible at the end of the line became Empress of the Sky, ruling beside him. He had returned from war unannounced. He caught his maid doing the unthinkable. She was saving his empire, and in the end, she saved him too. But here is the final secret no one in the Empire ever knew. On the night of the dark moon, when fire and sky joined hands, the Emperor's seal recorded something ancient texts had only whispered about. Mira's grandmother had not chosen the Drakemore Palace by accident. 1,000 years ago, a Sky Dragon Queen and a Fire Dragon King had made a promise. If darkness ever returned, their bloodlines would find each other again. Mira and Kale were never strangers. They were a promise, kept across 10 centuries. So the Emperor who came home unannounced did not just catch a maid that night. He caught destiny in motion. The coldest heart in the Empire was saved by the quietest girl in the room. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the one holding everything together. If this opened your eyes, wait until you hear what the sky dragons left buried beneath the northern battlefield. That story is coming next. So what did we learn from this incredible story? The strongest empires can be attacked from the inside, not the outside. The people we overlook are often the ones protecting us in silence. And sometimes, heart has to break before it can truly open. Kale won his greatest battle not with fire, but with trust. If this story touched your heart, do 3 quick things right now. Hit that like button, because it tells us you want more stories like this one. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because we release new dragon romance and fantasy stories every single day, and you do not want to miss what is coming. And share this video with one person who loves a good plot twist. Want more right now? Watch the story on your screen next. The Dragon King's forgotten bride returned, and the whole court went silent. It has a twist even bigger than this one. Now here is tonight's question for you. If you were Kale, would you have forgiven Myra for hiding the truth? Or would you have walked away? Drop your answer in the comments below. We read every single one. Sweet dreams, story lovers. See you in the next one.